There are stories that crash into our lives without warning, rattling everything in their path. And then there are stories that slip in softly, like a familiar knock you almost recognize, carrying decades of devotion, trials, triumphs, and a truth that keeps whispering long after the last chapter closes. Today, we unlock one of those quiet, unforgettable stories. This is the life of Judge Lynn Toler and her husband, Eric, Big E, Mumford, a love that didn't sparkle for cameras, didn't chase headlines, and didn't perform for applause. Instead, it grew in the real world, where hearts bruise, heal, try again, and choose each other even on the days when choosing feels hard. Their home wasn't built on perfection. It was built on persistence, honesty, and a commitment that weathered every season. And now, we step into the room Lynn has been learning to walk through alone. The room where grief doesn't vanish, it simply becomes part of the furniture. A room she must live in without the man who sat beside her for more than 30 years. Before she became a TV icon, before the robe, the bench, and the authority, Lynn was simply Lynn. A young woman raised in a home where strength wasn't optional. Her father, Bill, brilliant yet battling himself, cast unpredictable shadows across the house. Her mother, Shirley, was the calm strategist who taught her how to stay steady when emotions tried to spill over the edges. Those early lessons shaped everything. They became her armor, her compass, and later, the blueprint she used to navigate love, conflict, and survival. Because Lynn learned early what tension sounds like, what silence can do, how words can wound or heal. She was raised inside emotional weather patterns most adults never learn to read. So when adulthood finally arrived, Lynn stepped into life with tools many people don't discover until their marriages are already breaking. She could peel apart conflict, spot emotional landmines, and understand feelings before they became storms. And somewhere along that path, she met Eric. Eric didn't enter her life with fireworks. No grand speech. No theatrical charm. He had a quiet weight to him, a grounded presence that made rooms feel steadier. He didn't compete. He didn't perform. He simply was, and that was enough to draw her in. He walked like punctuation, not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. A human pause. At the time, Eric was a father of 4, already carrying the responsibilities of real life. But his calm strength matched Lynn's sharp mind in ways neither expected. Their worlds didn't collide. They blended, slowly, respectfully, two colors learning where their edges meet. Lynn later admitted that Eric entered her life during a moment of internal rebuilding. She was still unpacking childhood tension, rewriting her own idea of peace. And Eric's steady nature became its own language, one she wasn't fluent in yet, but desperately wanted to learn. Their relationship wasn't dreamy or polished. It was raw. It was textured. It was real. They loved each other wholeheartedly, which meant they also challenged each other without mercy. And over time, that honest love grew into something durable. Something earned. Because marriage, especially theirs, wasn't a frozen photograph. It moved. It shifted. It bruised. It repaired. It demanded work. For Lynn and Eric, the biggest battle wasn't lack of love, it was learning each other's emotional navigation systems. Lynn confronted conflict directly. Eric retreated into silence. She needed clarity. He needed breathing room. Those differences became the quiet cracks that grow in long relationships. The kind that don't explode, but erode. And years later, Lynn publicly admitted something most people would hide. Their marriage nearly collapsed. Not for lack of love, but for lack of emotional translation. But here's where their love story stands apart from so many others. They refused to let the cracks win. They chose to repair. To stay. To grow when leaving would have been easier. They talked through the hard things. They learned how to disappoint each other without destroying each other. They rebuilt themselves as partners, piece by piece, until the distance became closeness again. Their marriage didn't transform overnight. It shifted slowly, like seasons changing without announcement. By the time decades passed, Lynn described their love not as perfect, but as earned. And while the world watched Judge Lynn Toler on divorce court, what they didn't know was that her greatest lessons didn't come from the bench. They came from Eric. Every time she broke down a couple's communication problems, she was drawing from her own past. Every time she talked about emotional avoidance, she remembered the nights Eric shut down. Every time she talked about rebuilding, she remembered how they saved their own marriage. Eric grounded her. Not with noise, but with steady presence. Behind closed doors, he reminded her to rest. To put the emotional scalpel away. To stop diagnosing everything and simply live. He helped her create a place where she could breathe without being a judge. Where puzzles, meals, and unpolished conversations formed their private little universe. The world knew her sharpness. He knew her softness. And that quiet love shaped the voice millions came to trust. But as the years passed, life's weight began pressing harder on their home. Family responsibilities shifted. Health challenges rose. The pace of life demanded more of both of them. Still, their bond deepened. Not through grand moments, but through daily devotion. Through patience. Through understanding. Through the kind of partnership that only forms after decades of walking side by side. And then, life changed. When Eric's health began to decline, Lynn stepped into a role no one prepares for. Caretaker. Protector. Emotional anchor. This chapter wasn't glamorous. There were no cameras. No applause. Just love, heavy, quiet, sacred. Lynn described those final months as fragile days carved into memory. Days where she noticed every smile, every breath, every moment they still had. Days she wished she could stretch, freeze, hold. Then came December 2022, the sunset of Eric, Big E, Mumford's life. The world didn't lose a celebrity. It lost a quiet hero. A father. A husband. A man who shaped one of the strongest women on television. For Lynn, it felt like the floor vanished. Grief poured into every corner of her life. Some days, it arrived like a soft ache, a reminder of love well lived. Other days, it felt like trying to breathe through shattered glass. But Lynn didn't hide. She didn't perform strength. She let the world see her humanity. She talked openly about grief being a companion she never invited. A shadow that now moved with her from room to room. She shared how Eric's presence still lived in her routines, in her decisions, in the parts of life where his voice once guided her. Fans gathered around her stories like a circle around a fire, warmed, comforted, connected. They shared their own grief, turning her page into a community of people learning how to live after loss. In her reflections, Lynn offered clarity not from a bench, but from experience. She talked about real relationships. The kind that don't sparkle, but survive. The kind where choosing each other daily matters more than any fantasy. She reminded the world that healing isn't a countdown. It's a tide, sometimes gentle, sometimes wild. And every time she speaks of Eric, there's an unmistakable warmth. A glow. A testament to love that wasn't easy, but was absolutely worth it. Today, Lynn continues to honor him not with grand statements, but with the way she moves through life. With honesty. With empathy. With resilience. With the emotional tools they sharpen together. Eric may no longer walk beside her, but his influence pulses through every lesson she teaches. Because love, real love, doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It stretches. It endures. So this is their story. A love that survived storms. A marriage built through choice, not chance. A partnership that molded a woman who molded millions. Judge Lynn Toler and Eric, Big E, Mumford never claimed perfection. What they had was far more valuable. A real, working, evolving love. The kind that doesn't end. The kind that writes chapters long after one heart stops beating. Their story isn't finished. It simply continues in a different form, carried in Lynn's voice, in her strength, in the lessons she shares with the world. And as long as she speaks his name, the story lives on.